All right, I think we are live, Florencia. I'm so excited to be introducing our next speaker, Florencia Ardissone. As the head of customer insights and ChaseNet analytics at JP Morgan Chase, Florencia masterfully fuses strategy, tech, and economics, excelling in orchestrating transformative initiatives across the globe. Without further ado, Florencia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Luke. Very excited to be here. So let me get started with a few pages that are going to be on the background. And as that is done, I'll kick off. Awesome. All right. So I was very excited about the topic, stop making bad decisions, for this strategy fest. So I wanted to start by reflecting on that. For me, it's kind of funny because typically we all try to make good decisions. Most of us at the time of making a decision are likely thinking that with all the information available, we're optimizing our solution set and making the most optimal choice at hand. Sorry about my technical difficulties. Okay, there. What is a good decision? I think a good decision is the result of leveraging all information available and strategically looking at options and optimizing the solution set given the constraints to maximize utility. I think you should think about an important decision you've made recently. For example, which apartment to move into. Remember how you approach that decision. Our goal is to make the best decision, but sometimes, and very often, at least this has been me in the past, we get overly concerned about potential better alternatives. We assess scenarios and probabilities and fear making a bad decision. Often we do get stuck and get into a loop of what ifs. That prevents us from making timely decisions and or enjoying the process. It is interesting that given that we don't really get the chance to relive the experience, the process of making that decision, the experience, is as important as that decision being made. Even if the outcome is negative or suboptimal, we do not typically get the chance to understand what would have happened had we taken a different decision. The reality is that with our life construct and its constraints, we should reflect on decision making in order to increase our chances at better outcomes. Better outcomes defined as those in which the utility of the entities or individuals involved are maximized within the constraints of the circumstances. In addition, having read the book Positive Intelligence by Shirzad Chamine, which I highly recommend, I believe in the value of anchoring more towards the sage perspective, what he calls the sage perspective, than the saboteur's perspective. Basically, this negative demon that we have telling us that we made a bad decision or that we could have done better. And the reality is that it is better and more productive to reflect on how we can make better decisions in the future, and it is less helpful to label ideas as bad and drive towards inaction, when in fact the goal is really the opposite. Rather to learn from an experience and use those learnings for better decision making the next time. So having said that, there are frameworks and tools that can help us take a reflective approach when making big strategic decisions. So ensuring that we check for access to all data points available, consulting with experts, and pressure testing our hypotheses, as well as pausing and taking a diligent course of action can all be helpful. I would like to take the time to share a personal experience that can draw some learnings you may find helpful. I had an idea to create an interactive digital insights tool that would leverage our payments big data assets to help businesses grow and make more informed business decisions. I sought and secured sponsorship from senior leaders across different lines of businesses and designed a pilot in which 40 small businesses would get access to the digital dashboard to validate this value proposition the product had. The idea was to track repeat engagement, to gather qualitative feedback, to get the product perception, the key features, and really understand if it was useful to inform business decisions for businesses. So I faced a lot of challenges, but I wanted to talk about the three most important ones. So there was no budget, and there were no direct reports or a formally assigned team towards this effort. Secondly, there were no processes for live testing with clients that the firm had available. And lastly, there was a big technology gap to support a digital live client offering. So while facing many of these challenges, I questioned whether the decision to spearhead the pilot had been a good one. Let me get in some of the details. So with no official budget and no tech team that will create the digital infrastructure to support this product, you can expect that it wasn't easy to convince the team to work on the project. In fact, we had over 190 employees that had to be part of this in order for the pilot to exist. So definitely not an easy task. So secondly, as in many other financial institutions that are very large, getting a product to be tested in the market, it really takes a village. Reality is that you do need to ensure that all the different functions are aligned, check on the processes, and because large organizations typically focus on stability and take a little bit longer to innovate, we had to create a test and learn that wasn't really pre-existent. Lastly, in terms of the technology gap for live testing of new products, what we wanted to do is to create and leverage an existing UI tool in order to limit as much as possible the need for tech resources to support this pilot, given that there were not formally assigned tech resources to this effort. So making this story, which is very long, a little bit shorter, it took us 6 months to stand up the pilot, and the pilot was very successful. We managed to quantify repeat engagement. We saw very positive perception of the product, and we met the metrics that we were looking for as we had designed the pilot. This was an amazing and great milestone, but I have to admit that this did not translate into investment for rollout immediately. So for me, that was very surprising. We had to pitch the idea to the lead of a business unit, and that did not result positively because there was fundamental investment that needed to take place before value-added investment. We went to another line of business and also tried to get the funding, and again, got a no. And lastly, we went to the innovation fund, and we also were told that, in fact, a business unit should fund it. So I did want to share some of the learnings of this experience, right? So very important 3 learnings. Even good ideas that have a great sound strategy need a lot of backing in order to lead to implementation and realize the value potential. So I had missed that emphasis and alignment on the results of the positive pilot. In addition, there's a second element that is very important, which is the alignment with key stakeholders. And it is as critical as the result. So even though I had the right stakeholders to seek sponsorship for the pilot, I did not have the full alignment of the stakeholders that would be needed to roll this out. And working in a large corporation and innovating in a large corporation is really, really hard. So resilience and influencing are 2 critical skills required for long-term success. But the story does not end there. And basically, after all of that, there was a new CEO on payments that really liked the pilot and really liked the value proposition of this product and decided to invest. So it took about a year to build this solution, and the challenges really actually only multiplied. We had to create the first end-to-end on the cloud IT architecture solution for this product, and we had to tokenize sensitive card data, had to scale big data assets, adopt agile methodologies. In addition, we had to partner with cross lines of business. So there was a lot going on in order to actually get to roll out this experience. And on a personal side, I was pregnant after 3 years of trying, and COVID was ongoing. So when we launched finally the first phase of the product, that coincided with 22 hours of labor and a C-section, in which I announced the launch of Customer Insights and also had delivered my child. So there was a little bit of a joke around having delivered 2 babies at the same time. So fast forward to today, we are live with hundreds of thousands of businesses, and this is a very successful product. Clients are giving us testimonials such as they're saving 20% on their payroll thanks to our product. It has been rewarded to get that type of feedback from clients and actually see it live in the market. I did want to mention that a good idea can translate into innovation with a few factors. I do think that influencing and motivating people towards a mission is mission critical. Secondly, I think breaking big bottlenecks and making them digestible, smaller problems that can be individually tackled is also really important. This needs to be coupled with leadership alignment and sponsorship, as earlier mentioned. Clearly, communicating and quantifying facts and metrics to instill trust is as important as delivering those results, so that people can understand that the mission is being accomplished. And then staying resilient and understanding that growth is non-linear is another critical factor. So I wanted to go back to the original question. Are there bad ideas? And how to avoid them? Typically, I wouldn't say that they're bad ideas per se, but the step we take to connect and empower a team of individuals towards a shared vision, the way that we communicate and drive alignment, the ability to rely on quantitative facts, and the openness to failure are all important ingredients in the transformation of the good ideas into actual impact that we can be proud of. So I wanted to share what I call a recipe for a good strategy. And there are some elements that are typically included. I think we need to articulate the goal and the plan pretty succinctly. The problem needs to be outlined, and why it is important needs to be addressed. Secondly, identifying the right map of partners and stakeholders is very critical, and syndicating the proposal with the leaders, seeking the right sponsorship, is time well invested. Thirdly, I should say, staying open to failure and being open to pivoting. This is really, when we talk about hedging our bets, pretty important. And how do you come up with alternatives while keeping the eye on the prize is really something that we need to pay attention to. And last but not least, instilling a culture of continuous improvement. So we want to create a shared vision, communicate progress and celebrate successes broadly, drive excitement, and allowing for the best idea to win, encouraging dissent, and so that we enjoy the ride and bring everybody along. So I do think that if we follow this recipe, we will end up with a good idea, because the experience will be a positive one, and that will gravitate towards impact, which will eventually pay us. So thanks very much for having me, and I'm going to open it to Q&A in case there are any questions.
Thank you so much, Florencia. That was an incredible keynote. I think we can all relate to anyone who's ever led an innovative project or initiative like that definitely can relate to that story. I personally loved the component that you talk about making sure we're learning from each of these decisions, and that decision-making process being just as important, if not more important, than the decision itself. One of the questions I've been seeing pop up in the thread quite consistently, and it's one that I also had, the team's touched on this at the beginning of our presentations today, is around the speed versus the process of making a decision. How do you balance that perfection paralysis versus your decision-making velocity? So I was wondering if you had anything to add around essentially that time frame when it comes to decision-making. I'll bring one of the examples to the stage for that.
I love the question, and I don't think that there's like an absolute answer, but I do think that in some cases having a finite time frame is actually quite helpful, right? Like, for example, right, we need to decide whether to invest in this company by July 26th, right? Like the fact that you actually have a drop dead deadline gives you like the extent of time that you can decide that you're going to invest in getting and gathering the right information, connecting with the right experts, and kind of figuring that out. And therefore, like having like a defined time frame for a decision making to have to be made is helpful. In a lot of cases, that's not the case, right? Like you actually don't have that pressure to deliver. And when that's the case, then it's a little bit more fluid. Like, how do you define what's the right amount of time in order to be effective without spinning your wheels too much? And that typically, I think, relates to personal decisions. In my case, for example, before joining JPM, it took me like a full year of like deciding that I actually wanted to change my job. And I did feel like that was too much. Like I actually spin my wheels too much. So I'm not going to tell you like what is your framework, but I do feel like to the extent that you can push yourself in saying, or I mean, unless it's like externally like defined, if you can try to define that time frame as part of the decision-making process, the more effective you can be in terms of following the recipe of like, you know, connecting with experts, taking the times to pause and reflect, and also getting close to your sage perspective versus the saboteurs that are going to tell you that you're making a bad decision.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much, Florencia. And one other one that you touched on very heavily in your keynote was around that stakeholder buy-in and getting the right people around a project or initiative that you want to run. So I'm going to bring one to the stage right now about how you effectively get that buy-in.
So again, not like a one size fits all answer, but being empathic is super important. So first, mapping and making sure that you do have that right set of stakeholders. I would say pressure test it again. You told me it was like, you know, X, Y, and Z. Very likely there's like W, X, Y, Z that you had forgotten. So first of all, actually, do you have that right map of stakeholders, and really like make sure you pressure test it. But secondly, I do think that you do need to create a common language. So I was talking about the clear communication and the quantification of the facts. So sometimes the facts, and the more that you can make data oriented and data proof points, it's an easier language that would get people that have different preferences and different points of view and different expertise, like to align to the vision and to understand what you're trying to convey. Of course, everything will need to be added with qualitative. Of course, you always need to tailor your messaging and understand what each and every single one of the stakeholders needs, but then take the baseline as the quantifiable metrics and ensure that that understanding exists. And then every time you talk to different stakeholders, bring in the other things that you know that they would care about.
Perfect. And the final piece that I had for you here is one that is always top of mind for me when it comes to change management. I love the culture of continuous development or continuous improvement you raised. But are there any tips or tricks that you have about how you create that culture internally?
So I'm very lucky because in my team, that has been the case. Like we really have a really awesome culture. And the reason why it's an awesome culture is because everybody is a part of it. It's not like what I do as a leader and it dies there. It's basically how do you make everybody in the team responsible for that part of the culture, you know? Every time, for example, we still practices like monthly team events, and each and every single one of the team members needs to lead one of them and decide which topic they want to bring to the team. And the team is there to reflect and enjoy from that experience. So there's an element of like you creating a proactive culture and enabling processes and activities that will get the team excited. And then there's an element of individually, independently, each and every single person in the team needs to lead that and feel like they are leaders in that, because then they're excited to do it and we are all like part of it versus like only coming from the top.
I think that's such a key point. Everyone definitely has a part to play. Well, I think we're at time here, Florencia. Thank you so much for a great presentation. We've got so many questions in chat that we couldn't get to, but definitely connect with Florencia on LinkedIn. I know she'd be happy to connect with you and answer that any we didn't get to. So thank you again, Florencia. And it is now time to present our next session, which is hosted by our media partners, Raconteur. Stay tuned, as just in a minute, we'll be sharing the current state of decision-making. The panel will be hosted by Raconteur editor Fran Cassidy, and it will have Pete Williams, Chief Data Officer at Penguin Random House, and Kristen Brown, VP of Strategy at Schneider Electric, joining as her guests. Thank you so much.
Thank you.